Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megzy, and today I will be doing the rating 1-star reviews of my favorite books tag. I've seen this floating around on BookTube. I think it went around a couple years ago, and so I decided to pick 5 of my favorite books, log onto Goodreads, and see what some of the worst reviews were for these books. I think it's so funny that how people always have such wildly different interpretations and experiences when reading works, and 1-star reviews generally tend to be more rage bait, if anything. If you want to check out my video about my favorite books of all time, I will link that down below. This does not include all of the books. I just wanted to do 5. So we will get started. The first book is Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates. I understand why people do not like this book. I think that it is over 700 pages long, and it is there are parts of it that are very explicitly crude. And so people definitely get upset, not just because of that, but because they are deeply invested and attached to the idea of Marilyn Monroe as a person. And they feel that this book, which is a fictionalized biography of her life, is offensive. I mean, I get it, but I still think that in terms of the quality of literature and the sheer amount of research that went into this book, I think it's still really, really good. And all the experimental forms that Oates plays with. But I get it if people don't like it. So some of these reviews, though, are just funny. Okay, here's one. Well, all I can say is that the author of this book seems like an ugly old dog who seems to be projecting her hatred of Marilyn Monroe in this novel, in the book, and movie, as I've heard. All I see is Marilyn being sexually, emotionally, and mentally exploited and abused. She is portrayed as having a dependency on all the men in her life. The infantilization is disturbing at times, which is completely the opposite of the true Marilyn. I think you're a little bit too attached to the idea of like who Marilyn was or what you want her to be, but okay. The author's purpose was this book to be a feminist novel, but WTF, it was literally the complete opposite. Okay, just a tip, if you're starting a review saying that the author is an ugly old dog, you're not very feminist yourself either. You can take literal actual criticisms of the novel without talking about a female author's looks. Because all we see is Marilyn being completely exploited in the novel by events that most likely did not occur, or by the abuse that happened. I mean, she was very much exploited in real life, and that was common of not just for women of the time, but the entire Hollywood star system, and that also included exploitation of men as well. Now that I've read the novel, I definitely do not want to watch the new movie at all. I've heard it is worse than this book, and hashtag I don't want to be traumatized. Okay. Here's another review I picked up. Never read it, but it's 0 stars just for being the book that horrendous film was based on. Well, that's not very helpful. You're not rating the book. Go on Netflix and rate the freaking film, then. I am never reading this author based solely on what she said about Marilyn, which shows she's the kind of woman I want no association with. My goodness. All right. Next reviews I found were for Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye. There were some really interesting takes on how bullying was portrayed in this novel, and people, I think, who were very dismissive of it. This person wrote, "This was awful. The main character was miserable as a child and miserable as an adult. She cared about nothing, so it was impossible for me to care about her. She was bullied at age 9 by another girl, and for the entire book, she obsesses about her bully. As a middle-aged woman, she still thinks about this bully all the time. Like, get over it already or get help." Actually, in the novel, she is almost killed. These bullies throw her hat down this snowy ravine, and she goes to retrieve it, and she slips and falls and hurts herself, and they just leave her there and walk away, and so she nearly dies. So yeah, this was beyond like just like verbal bullying. And yeah, bullying literally does. Psychologists have studied how much bullying is a form of an adverse childhood experience and childhood trauma It's not always just like what you experience at home. So I think people are just very dismissive of this. They just don't get it. It's very obvious they don't experience themselves. The most interesting character in the book was the main character's brother, who was passionate about science, became a famous astrophysicist, and died in a spectacularly awful way. And he was barely mentioned. Well, it's not about him. Nothing else happens, and there are so many words and so many endless long descriptions of things that don't matter at all. It's lit fic. The main character just drones on and on. Okay, whatever. I just don't care about this. All right. Next person who just dismisses and minimizes bullying. Where to start? I'm sorry, but Elaine's depressing attitude irked me throughout the whole novel. I prefer characters with personality, a trait Elaine Risley lacks immensely. I hated her retrospective throughout the whole novel. She clings stupidly to an event in her childhood when she was 9 years old, and her friends Cordelia, Grace, and Carol bully her lightly. Nearly killing someone is bullying you lightly, I guess. Boo-hoo. Poor Elaine, who had to suffer some minor verbal abuse. It was more than just verbal abuse. Did you read the book? That still haunts her childhood. Like, are you effing kidding me? This is a parody of real traumatic experiences that people go through. I'm sorry. I give it 2-star because it was mildly entertaining and maybe useful for firewood. I love when people are like, well, I'll give it a star because it's useful for firewood. Like, no, you actually gave it 1 star. So, okay. These people just don't get it. They don't get it. All right, the next book I will be reviewing is Libra by Don DeLillo. This is a reimagining of the events that lead up to JFK's assassination, and a lot of it follows a reimagining of the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. Kind of similar to the reimagining of the life of Marilyn Monroe. Okay, this person said, to give you an idea of how bad it is, the only person in the book that you care about is Lee Harvey Oswald. That is literally the point of the book. What do you think you were reading? He's like literally on the cover. Also, there is one chapter that is actually poetic, and that is a chapter about the events of November 22nd, 1963. So the best things in this book are Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination of JFK. The book was on some list of 100 books that you have to read. This book belongs on a list, all right, but not that one. Okay, so this person wrote, probably because it's fiction based on fact, and I know too many facts about this incident to believe any fiction of it. And when I cheated to the end note, Don DeLillo insists that he made up large chunks of the book, but based on things that could have happened. I'll stick with Roger Stone's book about LBJ killing JFK. It makes more sense. Why did he do that? Because he wanted power? Because he wanted to expand the Vietnam War? By the way, I stopped readying about a third the way through. Okay, the 4th book I will be looking at negative reviews was Severance by Ling Ma. It takes place in New York City during a global pandemic. This is not COVID, but it was written before COVID, that essentially turns to this zombie apocalypse. It was written in 2018. It was published in 2018. There was a very long angry review I found that was just absurd. I mean, the reviewer does critique the book that they felt like it didn't work. I think they just are missing the point. But there were some very pointed lines in here that I was like, are you writing about something in mind, or are you writing about the book? Because this person is very triggered. So this person said, we get another modern woman tale of the Efron variety for the post 9/11 crowd. Except whereas Efron's heroines actually had the gall, to be unlovable weirdos, the protagonist of this novel is just another millennial narcissist. You know those girls who sublimate their childbearing impulses with purse dogs and succulents. Did Jordan Peterson write this review? Girls who stay in failing relationships because they can't afford the rent by themselves. That is a real systemic problem. Girls who listen to Lizzo and wear mom jeans, and who have malleable politics based on whatever god-awful woke comedian went viral on Twitter last week. I know if you're using the term woke seriously, you lose all credibility, because I don't think you could define what woke is. It also isn't an immigrant story. Sorry, it's not. As a child of immigrants, I call bullshit. Not all immigrant stories are the same. Who do you say it's not an immigrant story? It was a clever little marketing maneuver meant to appeal to the Harry Potter humping, Zoloft popping, Jacobin reading, Vox podcast listening, Clintonite shitlibs who still haven't recovered from the 2016 election. This person is very triggered by this. It was a tactic and it worked because people are falling all over themselves in praise of this novel's discussion of social politics. And it's nauseating to see that it worked. Sorry, but hawking your family trauma just to sell books seems more than a little disingenuous to me. Do you read fiction? Like, do you read literary fiction? I mean, this novel is more like speculative fiction, but like so much aspects of writers' work does involve like their own personal trauma that is like enmeshed into characters. That's just like any writer will tell you that. And to be honest, like I wrote a novel, I didn't fully finish it, but it had some family dynamics in it, family trauma that was not my own. It was a reimagining of my grandmother's own family trauma. And I feel like people would read that and think, oh, it's what she personally experienced. And it's not. It's I mean, it is family trauma. It was in the family, but it's not what I lived. It was my reimagining of what my grandmother would tell me. So again, I like family trauma, like if you want to talk about people who write nonfiction, like memoirs, that's one thing. But like what is this person is just okay. Am I the only one that can see the Empress has no clothes? At the end of the day, this novel, where the entire world is ending and the protagonist still manages to make it completely about herself. I suppose that was a larger part of the social commentary, because if that doesn't spell out millennial to you, I don't know what does. This person is definitely a boomer. They completely missed the critique of capitalism. Why do you think people stay in feeling relationships? Why do you think women delay childbirth? Not that every woman wants to have kids, by the way, but these things have been delayed because millennials they do not have the same opportunities that earlier generations had before them. And Gen Z has it even worse. And so this novel was absolutely in a kind of like roundabout way, a critique of that. It just went over their head. But also, I just thought it was weird when they said Jacobin Reading and Clintonite, because Jacobin is the online publication of the DSA, and Democratic Socialists are definitely not Clintonites. They're not neoliberals. I think that like, and then the last book is I will be reviewing the 1-star reviews that stood out to me was Philip Roth's Indignation. Interesting reviews here. This person wrote, must be an allegory for something. The Korean War, probably. I don't think I got it. I'm disappointed with where it went. Indignation is what I'm feeling after reading this pointless trash. At least it was short. This book was thin, but even so, there's not enough story here. It's a short story stretched out into novella. I got very tired of Roth's persistent sexism. It's somewhat more tolerable here because it's supposed to be historical, 1940s. Actually takes place in the early 50s. So I don't think you're paying attention, because the Korean War is mentioned a lot in this book. But I still didn't like the main character and wasn't sympathetic at all about his making the wrong choices. I did feel sorry for the woman who liked him. I thought maybe he'd grown up after reading The Plot Against America. Okay, now we're talking about Philip Roth, not the character, which was interesting and worth reading, but evidently not. Okay, is this a critique of the book, or is it a critique of Philip Roth as the author? This doesn't okay, I don't know. People are wild. I know if I ever have like a published work, I do not want to look at the 1-star reviews, because people are just ruthless online. They're just trolls. They just like project whatever is going through their mind at the time onto the book. It's just wild. I mean, whatever. People are entitled to their own opinions. That's fine. But some of these reviews just didn't really give good analysis, I feel, of, I don't know, they just missed the point to me. So yeah. But that's it. That was my review of 5 of my favorite books and the 1-star reviews that were entertaining to me. So I do plan to make a video with 5-star reviews, maybe of my least favorite books, or I could just make a video about my least favorite books in general. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.